Tales of Glory is a new VR swordfest that allows you to participate in huge medieval battles. It boasts a large variety of weapons, physics-based combat, and is available now for 23 quid or 30 bucks. According to the devs, these battles are ultra immersive and epic, and you'd hope that's at least partly true for the asking price. So how does it do? Well, it's safe to say that as far as medieval fighting goes, Tales of Glory jumps straight into the #1 spot by using a lag-based weapon system. When you swing your weapon, it will lag behind depending on its weight, which imbues it with some heft. If you swipe your hand quickly past your enemy's face, hopefully your mace will follow along and force them to share the contents of their skull a moment later. In practice, the weapon lag system works well, although it does feel kind of sluggish at first, and it is a bit weird that you need to swing your arm quickly to generate the force. If you move your arms a bit more slowly, to simulate you actually swinging your bardiche with the gravitas it deserves, it will have way less force behind it. It's fair enough, because the flip side would be accidentally touching your enemies and maiming them, because controllers can't read minds. This means that the game encourages you to swipe and stab with some gusto, so be careful with what you have around the edge of your play space. For me, the worst I did was punch my external sound card hard enough to send its USB cable flying out the back. In that moment, everything went quiet, until I plugged it back in. So, swinging your weapons is a decent experience, but what happens when you hit? Well, sometimes things line up perfectly and you'll swipe someone's legs and everything is right in the world. Or maybe you'll cut off their arm or face. But unfortunately, in general, collision is not the greatest. This becomes especially apparent when you're using the ranged weapons. It feels more like there are key areas that if you hit, it will count, rather than a real human being who's squishy everywhere. All things considered, combat is a bit clunky. When you're going toe-to-toe with any individual, it's not really a tactical affair. You can move quicker, swing faster, and bombard them with a flurry of hits. The difficulty then comes from their strength in numbers and the skirmishers, because holy fuck, these guys are accurate. There are 4 difficulty modes, and from what I could tell, it's really just a case of making you die quicker. There's a sort of Halo-esque regeneration, so if you get hit, you can run away and wait for the colours to go back to normal. Playing in the hardest difficulty might be preferable, because that's much more of a one hit and you're dead kind of affair. I think for subsequent plays, this will be how I go about it. Otherwise, there's just not really much challenge. I generally prefer realism settings in wargames, and one thing that stuck out as bad to me was the way that some enemies just kept going after multiple hits. Hopefully that's part of the hitbox issues, and maiming will be a lot more common at a later date. You're not the only one on your side in combat. You've got a bunch of allies constantly spawning in. In general, in the fights you choose a number between 10 and 100 active NPCs at a time, depending on your computer performance. And then you set a cap of total spawns for your side and the enemy's side. Or you can just use the quick battle setting, but I'm not sure if that will brutalize computers on the less powerful end of the spectrum. You're the commander, and so you can call on your allies to do one of 4 things. You can get them to follow you, hold, attack, or do what they want. They are pretty fucking stupid, so make sure you do the tutorial to understand how to command them. I did find at times that my experience was worsened by the fact that my own bunch of prats were standing on the back walls waiting for me to come tell them to follow.
Follow me!
As a quick aside, on the subject of performance, there is a demo and this game has some fairly hefty minimum requirements, so make sure that you try that out before buying. Anyways, it's definitely much nicer to go into combat with your buddies around, but the way that the fight unfolds is always pretty shallow. Occasionally cool things will happen, like a boulder coming from the sky turning someone into paste. Oddly, these boulders don't do anything to you. There's a number of environments, and from what I could tell, playing the town one should be avoided on lower end systems, because as fun as it is to kill townspeople, I wouldn't want them counting towards my NPC cap. The most fun I had in Tales of Glory, aside from brutalizing archers, has to be with my colleagues around me, using either a bow or a crossbow. These are really fun to use, and each feels suitably different. As I said before, they do really highlight a lot of the issues with hitboxes. If you get a headshot, that'll usually work, and typically center mass or shoulders seems very reliable. When someone drops to the floor, they're either immune or damn near immune from damage, which is a sin. If I see someone on the floor, that's my prime time to come over and use them as an organic axe holder. One other thing that helps the fighting is the lack of a HUD. It's really nice to just be dropped in a world and left to do your thing. The start of each fight involves kitting yourself out. You go to your weapon stands and grab your weapons. You have 4 holding slots for weapons and ammo. You've got your left and right shoulders and your left and right waist. You've also got a spot on your back, which is where you mount your shield. It is really responsive switching weapons. The fights do tend to wear on, but at the start I always felt like a kid in a candy shop. Deciding what you're going to use, how you're going to utilise the slots available is always fantastic. Though I was met with massive amounts of lag before each fight started, so make sure you hear the horn before you decide that the game isn't going to run nicely for you. There's also something incredibly satisfying about starting a fight, running into combat on a horse. I really liked the vibe of being on a horse, but the actual swinging of the weapons was pretty awkward. And given the volume and relatively bad AI of the enemies, killing from horseback is mostly just inefficient. Being a horse archer, on the other hand, was great. It's also great to run into the heart of battle, jump off, drop your lance or whatever you've got, and whip out your sword and shield. The sound of weapons clashing, background music, and the aesthetic all do a good job of setting the scene. General bugs and annoyances with things like menu interaction aren't really worth talking about, because as far as I can tell, every obvious inconvenience has been raised with the dev, who's patching those things as I speak, which is always a good sign. When you're really into it, Tales of Glory is a treat, but the lack of depth in the scenarios you can do at the moment means the sheen does wear off fairly quickly, and it moves more towards feeling like a tech demo rather than chivalry, but in VR. An amazing tech demo, but a tech demo nonetheless. That's where the multiplayer comes in. It's not here right now, but it's coming in a future update, and only time will tell if the netcode works well. As the combat is involving but janky, I have to say the multiplayer might be a bit of a mess. Also, knowing what VR multiplayer is like, it might be a bit of a struggle getting an online game going, so definitely join a community or a Discord or whatever if you're looking to find players. Given the variety in the levels available already, I really think an objective-driven single player should be a high priority moving forward. This would naturally introduce more enemy types, more colour palettes amongst the enemies, and I think would result in an amazing game. I have to say, if this fighting was in Prevent the Fall, that would be my favourite thing to date by a country mile. I think it really speaks to the fundamental quality of Tales of Glory, that it really feels like the groundwork is there, and now the combat needs purpose. So, as it stands, Tales of Glory is a good battle simulator, with a bunch of environments, weapons, a realistic amount of enemy types, and it generally looks and sounds the part. For me, unfortunately, it's not got staying power at the moment, which is a shame considering the price. I know people differ on what they think gives a game value. Personally, I think something that costs 75% of a AAA title needs to either have a lot of polish and some kind of linear progression like Wilson's Heart, or some staying power and mechanics to make you keep coming back, like To the Top. I really don't want to end this review on a negative. As I've said, multiplayer's in the works, and hopefully with all the brilliance that's come out of the devs so far, Tales of Glory can continue to develop into a bit more of a deep experience through either its multiplayer or single player. At the moment, I think it's not worth the asking price, but that's early access for you. I do think this is one to support. VR is all about novelty and experience, and this is certainly one of the most novel things on offer right now. If money is no bother, then grab it. If you're not incredibly excited, I'd maybe wait to see how it develops. I've got pretty high hopes for this one. If you like this video, then please like it. If you want to see more, then subscribe, and I hope to see you next time.